What if I told you a single sentence could silence an entire room, freeze the air, and flip the power balance in an instant? Imagine a billionaire, smug in his wealth, tossing an insult at a waitress in a language he assumes she can't possibly understand, only for her to look him dead in the eye and answer back perfectly. That's not just a comeback. That's a reversal. And it all began here. It was a Thursday afternoon in Palm Springs, California, the kind of afternoon where the sun burned bright outside, but inside the city's most expensive restaurant, everything gleamed with quiet perfection. Marble floors reflected soft golden light. Polished tables stood like glossy mirrors. The air smelled faintly of citrus and leather, underscored by classical music designed to remind you this place wasn't for just anyone. Servers moved with synchronized precision, trays balanced, smiles measured, timing flawless. Among them was Elena Daniel. She wasn't invisible like many in her role. She carried herself with a calm strength, dark hair neatly tied back, eyes sharp, steps confident. Regulars knew her name, and not just because she took their orders. She remembered anniversaries, kids' names, and favorite dishes. Elena didn't just serve, she connected. But the man at the corner table wasn't there for connection. His name was Khalid Rahman, a billionaire from Saudi Arabia, polished in power, wrapped in a suit so sharp it looked sculpted. His gold watch flashed like a reminder with every flick of his wrist. Time is money, and he owned both. The aura around him wasn't warmth. It was command. When Elena approached, her tone was professional, steady, welcoming. "Good afternoon, sir. May I start you off with a drink?" But he didn't even glance at her. His eyes stayed locked on his phone screen, thumb flicking like she wasn't worth the space she occupied. After a pause, he muttered without looking up, "Water. With lemon. Nothing else." Short. Clipped. Dismissive. Elena nodded with practiced grace, the kind that comes from swallowing 100 small humiliations in the service industry. But then, just as she turned, Khalid let a smirk creep across his lips, a sneer hidden behind foreign words he thought were his shield. Here's the twist. What he didn't know was that his shield was about to shatter. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room is holding the loudest surprise. And when Elena answered him back, in the very language he thought would keep him safe, the entire restaurant stopped breathing. But what exactly did she say, and why did it leave the billionaire looking like the smallest man in the room? He leaned in close to the younger man across the table, a junior associate hungry for approval, and dropped a few words in Arabic. The words themselves were cloaked in another language, but the tone? The tone was universal. Sharp, cutting, meant to belittle. Even if you couldn't understand a syllable, you'd feel it in your chest. It wasn't casual banter, and it certainly wasn't praise. It was the kind of thing people say when they believe no one in the room has the power to call them out. Elena returned just in time, placing the glass of water in front of him with the steady hands of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. Her smile never cracked, but her eyes caught the subtle sneer on his face. She didn't need a full translation. She'd picked up enough Arabic over the years to recognize the sting in his words. And in that instant, something shifted. The tension wasn't loud or obvious. It was like a storm brewing far in the distance, inching closer with every second. Khalid didn't notice. His attention was buried in the glow of his phone, another jab in Arabic tossed at his associate, followed by a hollow laugh. He thought he owned the table. He thought he owned the room. But arrogance is a blindfold. It makes men miss the warning signs staring right at them. Because here's the truth. Elena wasn't just another waitress balancing orders and trays. She had a story of her own. And in just a moment, that story was going to flip the entire restaurant upside down. Have you ever witnessed arrogance so thick it sucked the air out of a room? The kind where everyone feels the weight, but no one dares to challenge it? That was the atmosphere now. Elena scribbled the order on her pad, though she already knew it by heart. Not because she needed to remember, but because it gave her something to do with her hands, a way to keep her calm in the face of disdain. The insult wasn't in the request, it was in the delivery. The clipped voice, the smugness, the way his eyes swept over her like she was invisible, a piece of background furniture. "Would you care to hear today's specials, sir?" she asked evenly, her voice measured, unshaken. He finally glanced up, annoyance flashing across his face. "I said water. Do you need me to repeat it?" His accent thickened each word, every syllable sharp enough to cut. Across the table, the younger associate shifted, torn between laughter and discomfort. His hands fidgeted with the silverware, eyes fixed downward, unwilling to join in but too afraid to push back. Silence was safer. Elena didn't push either, not yet. She'd learned long ago that people like this fed on reactions. Instead, she turned and made her way toward the bar, her steps calm, her face unreadable. Behind her, the other servers had begun to notice. They exchanged looks, quiet whispers under their breath. They could feel it too. Something in the air was building. But here's the thing about quiet storms. When they break, they don't whisper. They roar. And Elena was holding something that Khalid never saw coming. The only question was, when would she unleash it? Jason, a tall waiter polishing glasses behind the bar, raised a brow. "Everything okay over there?" he asked quietly. Elena gave a small shrug. "Nothing new. Some people don't see you. Only what you're carrying." Her tone was calm, but her eyes told a different story. When she turned back, she caught Khalid's gaze fixed on her. Not with warmth, not with respect, but like a buyer sizing up merchandise. He leaned toward his associate again, voice dropping into Arabic, and this time the intent was undeniable. The insult was about her posture, her appearance, even the way she spoke. Elena's jaw tightened, but she didn't take the bait. "Not yet." Have you ever felt the sting of words not meant for you to understand, but you knew exactly what they meant? That was the storm brewing inside Elena. She stepped back to the table, her voice steady. "Have you had a chance to look over the menu?" she asked, addressing them both. For the first time, Khalid put down his phone and locked eyes with her, his stare heavy with challenge. "Bring me the lamb. Don't let it come out dry. I don't trust kitchens in this country." Elena wrote it down, her pen steady, her silence sharper than any reply. She turned to the younger man. Finally, he spoke, his voice polite, almost apologetic. "I'll have the salmon, please." "Thank you." His relief was obvious when Elena's smile softened in return. "Would you like rice or vegetables with that?" she asked kindly. "Vegetables, please," he said, grateful just to be treated like a person. "Kindly do us a quick favor. Please hit that like and subscribe button if you are touched by this story. Your support keeps us creating and sharing more powerful stories as this one. Thank you. Now, let's get back to our story." As Elena walked away, Khalid's laughter followed. Another dart in Arabic, sharper this time, mocking. What he didn't know was that every word landed. He had no idea that Elena had grown up in Morocco with her grandmother after her parents split. He didn't know that Arabic wasn't just a language she studied. It was part of her life, her heritage, her soul. And here's where arrogance makes its fatal mistake. Assuming silence means ignorance. Elena slipped the order to the kitchen and leaned on the counter for a moment. Her heartbeat was steady, but something inside her had awakened. This wasn't just another rude customer. This was a man about to learn that his words had been heard all along. She adjusted her apron, took a breath, and stepped back into the dining room. The restaurant hummed with life. Businessmen talking shop, families eating lunch, a couple whispering by the window. Everything looked normal. But the loop was already tightening, because soon, in the middle of that calm, the moment would come. The moment when the man who thought he was mocking her in secret would realize he'd been understood from the very beginning. No one was really watching Khalid, not yet. Elena returned with a basket of warm bread and a dish of butter, the quiet courtesy every guest received. She placed it carefully on the table, her tone polite. "Here's something to enjoy while you wait." Khalid barely glanced at it. His lip curled, and in Arabic he muttered just loud enough for Elena to catch. "Cheap." Just like the one serving it. The words landed like a sting across her skin, though her face never revealed it. She'd endured rudeness before, many times. But this felt sharper. Personal. Have you ever been in a room where someone's arrogance filled the air so thick you could almost taste it? That's what was happening here. The young associate shifted uneasily, eyes flicking to Elena. He'd understood the insult too, but his silence said it all. He wasn't about to risk correcting a man like Khalid. Elena straightened, gave a measured nod, and softly replied, "Enjoy." She turned away, but Khalid wasn't done. He leaned back, loosened his tie, and this time raised his voice in Arabic. "Look at her walk, like she owns the place. A waitress with attitude, thinking she matters because she carries plates." The mocking tone cut through the restaurant like broken glass. A couple at a nearby table glanced over, not catching the words, but catching the cruelty. Tone needs no translation. Elena stopped mid-step, her back still to him, her notepad pressed tightly in her hand. It wasn't just his voice she was hearing, it was every dismissal, every moment of being underestimated replaying in her mind. But here's the thing about silence. Sometimes it's not surrender. Sometimes it's the calm before the strike. She steadied herself, exhaled, and turned back, her expression unchanged.
Calm.
Collected. Yet inside, a decision was already forming. Back at the table, the associate leaned closer and muttered, "Maybe we should keep it down." Khalid smirked, dismissive.
Why?
"She doesn't understand a word." His hand flicked toward Elena, like she was nothing more than a nuisance in his way. What he didn't realize was that every single word had already been understood. And soon, his arrogance would meet its reckoning, in front of everyone. Men like him always assume women like her will stay silent. If he had spoken in English, every eye in the room would have turned on him. But in Arabic, Khalid believed he was hidden. He wasn't. Elena returned with the pitcher, calm and steady. She set it down, lifted his glass, and poured with deliberate care, her eyes locked on his. Unshaken, unmoving. Khalid leaned forward, lips twisting, and then came the words that shifted everything. In Arabic, he sneered, "She should be thankful we even let her work here. A woman like that belongs in the kitchen, not standing in front of me." It wasn't just offensive, it was meant to strip her of dignity entirely. His associate dropped his eyes, ashamed. At the next table, a man paused, sensing the weight in the air. The restaurant itself seemed to quiet, as if bracing for what might come. You know that moment when arrogance crosses the line and the room feels it? That's where they were now. Elena set the glass down gently. No anger, no noise, just controlled calm. She stepped back, gaze fixed on him. She had heard enough. But what came next wasn't rage. It was something sharper. Khalid leaned back smugly, phone in hand, convinced he had won. Elena breathed in slowly, then spoke, her voice low, steady, flawless Arabic. "Would you like more bread, sir? Or are the insults keeping you full already?" The words sliced cleaner than a shout could. His phone slipped, nearly crashing against the table. His head jerked up, eyes wide, confidence crumbling in an instant. And in that breathless silence, Everyone waited to see what would happen to a man who thought no one could ever challenge him. For the first time, Khalid's mask slipped. His composure cracked just enough for everyone to notice. His associate's jaw fell open, fumbling between English and Arabic, as if no language could save the moment. You speak Arabic? Elena's eyes stayed locked on Khalid. Her reply came smooth, fluent, unwavering. Still in Arabic, she said, perfectly. The words weren't loud, but they carried. The energy in the room shifted. Forks froze midair. Conversation stalled. Even without understanding, people felt it. Have you ever seen arrogance suddenly realize it's trapped? That's what was happening now. Khalid blinked hard, forcing out a laugh that sounded brittle, defensive. So, you memorized a few lines from a phrase book. Cute. Elena didn't blink. Her voice was steady, her truth sharper than his mockery.
No.
I learned it from my grandmother, who raised me in Cairo. Every single word you've said since I came here, I understood. The associate slumped back in his chair, hand covering his mouth, torn between shame and disbelief. At the next table, a couple exchanged quick glances, leaning in, sensing the weight of something about to break. Khalid's mouth opened, then shut again. His tongue darted nervously across his lips, searching for a comeback, but nothing came. Elena leaned slightly forward, her tone calm, almost gentle, yet undeniable. You assumed my uniform meant I was beneath you, that you could say whatever you wanted without consequence. But respect isn't optional, not here, not anywhere. And with that, the room wasn't just watching, they were holding their breath. Khalid stiffened, his fingers gripping the table's edge. He could feel the eyes on him now, the same arrogance that once shielded him now burning like a spotlight. The silence stretched, tense and fragile, every second amplifying the weight of her words. From the back of the restaurant, a fork clinked against a plate. A whisper rippled. The moment was alive, electric, waiting for his next move. And when he finally spoke, his voice was thinner, weaker, the command gone. You misunderstood me. But everyone knew. It was too late. Elena arched a brow and, this time, answered in clear English so every ear in the room could catch it.
No.
I didn't. A wave of gasps rippled through the nearby tables. Now everyone understood. Khalid shifted, his polished confidence unraveling in pieces. He wasn't used to being challenged, least of all in public. But Elena's strength wasn't in volume. Her truth was enough. In that moment, the balance had shifted. For once, it wasn't the billionaire in command. It was the waitress with a notepad and nothing to lose. Have you ever watched power slip right out of someone's hands, faster than they could grab it back? That's what was happening here. Khalid sat straighter, trying to stitch together his composure, though his eyes betrayed unease. His arrogance had thinned, replaced by something sharper, fear. Still, he wasn't built to surrender. His voice dropped lower, edged with venom. You think speaking my language makes you my equal? His Arabic no longer sounded playful. It was defensive, brittle. Elena didn't flinch. I don't need to think it. I know it. And language doesn't belong to you. It belongs to anyone willing to honor it. Which clearly you don't. The associate tugged at his blazer, wishing he could disappear. Khalid, maybe we should, but Khalid silenced him with a flick of his hand, leaning in, his words heavy. You're nothing but a server. Do you really think your little act changes anything? Money decides power. Always has. Always will. And yet, in that instant, even his wealth couldn't shield him. Elena tilted her head, her voice calm but cutting. Money may buy your seat, but respect? That has to be earned.
His jaw tightened.
He stabbed a piece of bread and bit down hard, the sharpness of the gesture betraying his frustration more than any word could. By the window, a couple whispered, eyes fixed on the exchange. They didn't know it yet, but the next moment would decide whether the room stayed silent or turned against him completely. At the bar, a man shifted on a stool, phone in hand but eyes quietly trained on the scene. The air was no longer subtle. Every table, every seat was tuned in. Then came the crack of metal on wood as Khalid slammed his fork down. "Do you know who I am?" Elena leaned in slightly, her voice calm but sharp. "Do you know who you are without all this?" Her hand moved lightly, gesturing at his suit, his watch, the untouched glass on the table. The words dropped heavy, rippling through the silence. Khalid's expression faltered. He wasn't used to questions that cut beneath his armor. Have you ever seen a man dressed in power suddenly stripped down to nothing but himself? That was the look on his face now. His associate broke in, voice hushed but tense. "She's right, Khalid. People are staring. Let's not." Silence. Khalid snapped, switching back to Arabic, his grip tightening on his glass. "You think this woman deserves respect? She's only playing games." Elena's arms folded loosely, her stance steady. "Games?" she repeated in fluent Arabic, her voice ringing with clarity.
No.
"This is real life. And every word you've thrown says more about you than it ever could about me." The quiet that followed was thick, suffocating. Even the kitchen staff had slowed, peeking through swinging doors. Elena didn't waver. She eased back, her voice soft, but laced with iron. "Respect isn't a wage. It's not handed down. It's given or it's gone. And right now, no amount of money can buy back what you just lost." And suddenly wealth meant nothing. What mattered was the room watching him crumble. Khalid's eyes darted around, faces fixed on him, some curious, others quietly condemning. His breath quickened, his grip on composure slipping. A forced laugh broke free, jagged and hollow. "This is absurd. You're making a scene." Elena shook her head once, her reply slicing through the tension.
"No, sir."
"You made the scene the moment you opened your mouth." And for a heartbeat, the restaurant froze, glasses untouched, forks suspended midair. What came next would decide if he walked out with pride or with nothing at all. But this moment wasn't only about the clash. It was about the truth beneath Elena's calm. A truth that would not just silence the room, but touch it. The restaurant seemed suspended, every sound muted. Khalid leaned back, gripping his glass like it might steady him, though the faint tremor in his hand betrayed him. His associate shifted uneasily, eyes darting between them, wishing the fire would die out. Elena didn't move. She knew this was the turning point, and her weapon wasn't anger. It was truth. Have you ever seen someone win a battle not with force, but with honesty? That was about to unfold. She exhaled slowly and spoke in Arabic, her tone low but steady. "My grandmother used to tell me, the tongue is a sword. It can cut down pride, or it can lift someone higher." She let the words hang, intimate and real. A soft gasp moved through the restaurant. Even those who didn't know the language felt the weight in her tone. Khalid blinked, disbelief breaking his mask. "Cairo," he muttered, as though the word itself caught him off guard. Elena nodded, this time shifting to English so all could hear. "When my parents divorced, I lived with my grandmother in Cairo. She didn't speak English, so if I wanted to know her, if I wanted to belong, I had to learn Arabic. Every story, every prayer, every market day, it became part of me." Her voice didn't shake. Her eyes stayed locked on his. And now the room wasn't just watching, they were listening. She leaned in, her final words sharp but controlled. "So when you use Arabic to insult me, you're not only mocking me, you're spitting on the woman who raised me, on the very roots of who I am. And in that instant, the room shifted again, waiting to see what broke first, his pride or his silence. The room was heavy with silence. Plates sat untouched, servers frozen behind the counter. All eyes fixed on Elena. Khalid shifted in his chair, his voice lower now, caught between defiance and retreat. I didn't know. Elena's stare cut through him. That's the problem. You never cared to know. The associate finally let out a breath, leaning forward, his tone gentle, respectful in a way Khalid's had never been. Your grandmother, she must have been strong. Elena's expression softened briefly. She was. She taught me dignity isn't measured by wealth or clothing. It's how you treat people who owe you nothing. Her words rippled through the room, sinking deep. A woman dabbed at her eyes, and a man across from her whispered, "Wow." Khalid swallowed hard, his bravado unraveling. His fingers tapped anxiously on the table, the posture of a man exposed. The stares around him told the truth. He was no longer admired. He was on display. Elena didn't gloat. She stood calm, steady. You walk into places like this expecting silence from those who serve you. But you forget, we have voices too. And today I used mine. Her words carried through the room. Khalid lowered his eyes, humility cracking through his mask. His associate whispered in Arabic, but Khalid gave no reply. He sat rigid, trapped in thought. The rest of the restaurant wasn't lost. They leaned into Elena's story, into the shift of power no one had expected. And though Khalid sat cornered, the moment wasn't finished. The breaking point was still ahead, when he'd be forced to respond, with every eye watching. His polished composure was fracturing like glass. Fingers drummed against his glass, eyes darting toward the door, then back to Elena, then to the crowd. In every room, he'd bent others to his will. But here in Palm Springs, he was the one being judged. The manager, Robert King, a man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair, had been lingering by the bar, unsure how far to step in. But when he noticed customers frozen mid-bite, eyes locked on Khalid's table, he knew he had to. He walked over, calm but firm. "Is there an issue here?" he asked, standing beside Elena. Khalid straightened quickly, eager to reclaim ground.
Yes.
This waitress thought it appropriate to lecture me during my meal. I expect professionalism, not. Charles cut in, his tone polite yet edged with authority. I've watched long enough to see she's handled herself with more professionalism than most could. A low murmur of approval stirred through the room, heads nodding. Khalid's face reddened. He wasn't used to being contradicted. He turned to Elena, his words sharp. You think you've shamed me? All you've done is remind everyone of your place. You're the server. I'm the client. That's the order of things. Elena didn't flinch. Her voice was even.
No, sir.
That's just the order you believe in. The quiet certainty hit harder than any raised tone. The room leaned closer, caught in the exchange. Khalid's associate finally spoke, his voice heavier than before. Khalid, maybe it's time to stop. You're not winning this. The sentence landed like a blow. For the first time, Khalid's grip on control slipped openly. His companion had sided against him. His jaw tightened, but his shoulders sagged. His eyes swept the room, every face staring back, not with admiration, but judgment. The man who thought he owned every space was suddenly the one exposed. Elena's voice broke the silence, softer now but unshakable. You asked if I thought I was your equal. The truth is, I don't need your permission to be. Everyone here already knows the answer. The words landed like a strike. A hush swept the room, broken only by murmurs of agreement. From the corner, a woman whispered, "She's right." At the bar, a man muttered, "About time someone said it." Khaled's shoulders dropped. He tried to speak, but nothing came. For the first time, silence bound him. Not from lack of thought, but from knowing no words could undo what he'd done. Charles, the manager, fixed him with a steady look. "Sir, you're welcome to finish your meal quietly. But if this continues, you'll be asked to leave." Khaled swallowed hard, nodding stiffly, eyes locked on the table, avoiding the stares pressing in from all sides. The suit, the title, none of it mattered. Control had slipped through his fingers. Elena didn't smirk. She simply straightened her notepad, slid her pen behind her ear, and said evenly, "Your lamb will be out shortly."
Come.
Professional. The lesson was already written. She didn't need to carve it deeper. As she walked away, the room exhaled together, as if they'd all been holding their breath. Yet the true ending wasn't silence. It was what followed. Minutes later, the lamb arrived, plated with care, the kitchen staff just as invested as the diners. Elena placed it in front of Khaled with the same poise she showed every guest. No bite in her tone, no gloating, just service. Khaled looked up, but the arrogance was gone. His eyes flickered, uncertain, unsure if he even had the right to speak. Beside him, his associate sat rigid, avoiding his gaze, weighed down by shame. The only sounds left were the scrape of cutlery and the clink of silverware against porcelain. The restaurant slowly found its rhythm again, though the weight of the scene still lingered. Diners stole glances at Khaled, then at Elena, silent approval written in their eyes. Midway through his lamb, Khaled finally set his fork down. His voice, quieter now, carried none of its earlier edge. In Arabic, he said, "You speak beautifully." Elena's gaze didn't waver. It's not the language that's beautiful. It's the respect behind it. Khaled's lips parted, then shut. For a man who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, those words struck heavier than any contract. His associate leaned forward, voice low but clear. "Khaled, maybe this is the kind of moment you're meant to keep. Money fades. Respect doesn't."
Khaled said nothing.
His eyes drifted to the window, to the bright California streets moving on without him. After a pause, he exhaled and whispered in English, "Maybe you're right." When Elena returned to clear the table, he slipped crisp bills onto the tray. She didn't glance at the money. Instead, she met his eyes. Respect matters more than tips. The words sank deeper than the cash ever could. Khaled hesitated, then gave a small nod, the closest thing to an apology he'd ever shown. As he and his associate left, the air in the restaurant eased. Conversations returned, plates clinked, but the moment remained. They hadn't just witnessed conflict, they'd witnessed truth. Charles passed by Elena, giving her shoulder a light pat. "Handled like a pro," he said quietly. She gave a faint smile and returned to her duties, but the weight of the moment stayed long after the billionaire walked out. The truth was clear: titles, wealth, and power can draw attention, but they will never guarantee respect. That's only earned through dignity and how you treat others. Sometimes the most powerful lessons don't come from leaders in suits or voices on stages. They come from the very people the world overlooks. So take this with you. Never assume you know someone's story. Never mistake silence for weakness. And never forget, respect costs nothing but carries everything. Ask yourself, how do you treat the people who serve you? The ones who hand you your meal, hold a door, or deliver your package? Do you truly see them, or do you look right through them? Because one day, the person you dismiss might be the very one who shows you the truth you've been ignoring. Respect isn't optional. It's the foundation of humanity. If this story struck a chord, like, share, and subscribe. Remind someone today that dignity can't be bought, and respect should never be withheld.